Hi, my name is Chris Melnyk, and I'm a realtor in Halifax, Nova Scotia. Today, I'm going to talk about myself in relation to my experience in real estate. Now, this story starts out a bit slow, but keep watching. It involves a crazy renovation project and a Vancouver record-setting commercial real estate project endorsed by world-famous figure skater Patrick Chan. And to make the beginning of the story more engaging, we'll be joined by my 7-month-old golden retriever named Hercules. Anyways, I started at a fairly early age in construction in Vancouver, BC. I worked on my first real job site in 2005. It was with a concrete forming crew for a small commercial building. Later, I began working as a helper to a contractor who did a lot of renovations in older multifamily buildings. After doing renovations for a while, I decided to start my own painting business and focus on exterior painting. I was very detail-oriented, and pretty soon I went from taking any job I could get to being completely booked up and only working on million-dollar or multi-million-dollar homes in North and West Vancouver. Then I wanted to work in a hands-off role. That's how I began working as a project coordinator for a high-end home builder in Coquitlam, BC, near Vancouver. Since I had a very good eye for detail, I coordinated fixing the deficiencies as the homes were being built. At the time, these homes were around $1.35 to $1.45 million. It was also around this time that I finished my degree in finance from Simon Fraser University. I had a good time there and was actually an ambassador for the business school, which allowed me to go to some very high-profile events and meet some very important people. Then I moved into sales. I received my real estate license in 2015 and started working for Cushman & Wakefield in commercial real estate in Vancouver. I work primarily in retail leasing. I help people find space for stores, restaurants, medical clinics, among all other sorts of uses. Now, I had no connection to commercial real estate, so I got my start in cold calling. Eventually, it led to clients that were 8- and 9-figure individuals, and even West Group, one of the top developers in Vancouver. Then other developers that I knew had a problem. They needed to lease space in their very high profile but challenging development, but didn't want to make it public. This means no signs, no mailers, no websites. They only wanted the spaces leased through relationships and cold calling. Now the rates on these spaces would be high, but if it worked, it would be extremely lucrative. Now, they had reached out to other top brokerages, but they just weren't happy with them. I was the only one who was constantly bringing them potential clients through my cold calling. So they offered to bring me on as their in-house leasing manager. I also took an active role in strategic planning, and I'd often meet with inspectors, engineers, and financiers. I worked very closely with the two partners, Dennis and Mark. It was hard, but after hundreds of hours of cold calling, we secured the anchor tenants we needed. These rent increases were record-breaking for the area. If you're wondering if it's possible to cold call and negotiate to generate millions of dollars in investment value, yes, it is. I did it. The project was known as the Drumming Club, then Axel Park, then Spiral Park, then just the Richmond Sports Mall. The Business Examiner actually did a nice article that mentioned the project. I'll put a link in the description. After the success of the development project, I wanted a new challenge and a change. So I moved to Hamilton, Ontario, and bought the roughest century home on the mountain. My plan was to do nearly all the renovations in the home myself. I hired an engineering company to make the drawings for the permanent application, and for a period of just over a year, I spent every day working on the home and the nights reading up on building code, electrical code, and plumbing code. Now in Ontario, homeowners are allowed to do all the work themselves and have it permitted and inspected as long as it's up to the same standards as a contractor, plumber, or electrician. But it is not easy. The scope of the project was one of the most extensive for a home of its type in the city. People said I was crazy. It would have been just cheaper to tear it down and build new, but I still wanted a 1920s home. People often brag that in their renovation, they stripped the home down to the studs. But in this home, I only ended up keeping 5 original full-length studs in the entire home. Everything else was effectively hollowed out so that from the outside, it would resemble something old, but from the inside, it would be completely up to modern standards. The roof structure was also largely removed so it could have shed dormers down either side. Also, my dad had flown out to help me a number of times, which was a great help. During the entire build, the only jobs I subcontracted out were asbestos removal around the boiler, the granite countertop fabrication, and some of the HVAC. Everything else was done by my dad and I. Now, towards the end of the project, I began looking into Nova Scotia more and more. It just seemed to be better. So I sold that house and left. I again took the licensing exam and received my real estate license, scoring at the top of the class. Quickly, I made good use of my past experiences, as I am one of, if not the only realtor in Atlantic Canada who has rewired and plumbed an entire home, framed an addition, roof, tile, drywalled, and installed moldings, windows, doors, all permitted and inspected. You can't even legally do that in the same way here in Atlantic Canada. So in that respect, it's a bit of a technicality of a title, but it's true. I found spotting issues with a quick glance saves a lot of time and money. It's also very helpful with new construction because not only do I understand all the terminology and specs, but I've literally built from plans before. I'm also one of the few realtors that can say they've been able to generate millions of dollars in excess of the otherwise market rate just by the way they pitch the property. I now do a fair bit of work with high-end homes, relocations, new construction, and first-time buyers who are unfamiliar with many of the components of homeownership. And if anyone's wondering, my hobbies still include building things, hiking, and anything car-related. I've driven up and down the California coast, then from the Pacific Ocean to the Atlantic Ocean, and even through Times Square, Manhattan. And now I have Hercules, who keeps me fairly occupied. So that's me, and I hope you got some value out of this video. Goodbye.